Hi everyone, welcome back to My Service Dog and Me. I'm Kate, and today we are going to be talking about some of our top tips for improving your dog's public access training. And they aren't necessarily the training tips that you would expect. So let's just jump right into it. Now, before we get into the tips, actually, there's one thing that you do have to keep in mind in order to be successful as you move your service dog through his public access training. And that is to remember that you don't have a service dog. You have a service dog in training. So the biggest sort of problem that arises for owner trainers and their dogs often has to do with rushing. Rushing the dog either purposefully or inadvertently, which I think is more common, where we just accidentally rush our dogs through their training because we need them to function as a service dog, or we feel that the best way for them to learn public access is to go everywhere with us, right? But the thing about it is that when your service dog is still in training, he's in training, which means he needs your help. He needs you to be actively training him. It means that he isn't going to accompany you everywhere. And so not rushing, not sticking to a timeline, allowing your dog to go at his pace through public access is really important. And so I want you to keep that in mind as we go through these tips that we're going to talk about today. Now, the first one is to actually visit your public access location without your dog, because this allows you to truly understand what your dog will be up against and determine if he's ready. So when your dog is beginning public access and even like moving through that sort of intermediate phase, it's really important that before you bring your dog to a specific location for public access training for the first time, that you have been to that location without your dog, simply to observe, to pay attention, to think about this location from your dog's point of view. This is an assignment that we've done when we've run public access workshops in the past. It's something we have our students do inside of our academy. And we always hear people, the feedback that we always get is that this was far more influential than they thought, because they finally, for the first time, realize all of the different distractions that their dog will come up against. Because we go to the store every day. We go out, or often, right? Like we go to these public locations regularly. To us, they're just kind of normal. But for your dog who's still in training, you need to go to that location, sit down, and really pay attention to all the sounds, all the sights, all the smells that might be there. Especially think about it from your dog's level, right? When I'm standing up, shopping carts are like below my eye line, right? Like, I mean, I see them, but they're not in my face. When I take a dog out into public for training, he's below those carts, which means those carts are coming straight at him, right? So you really, if you want to improve your dog's public access, one of the best things that you can do is go to that location wherever you're going to train. Maybe you're going to go to Tractor Supply, or maybe your dog is going to go to Target with you, or whatever it is, okay? One of the best things that you can do is to go there ahead of time, really pay attention to the distractions that are present, and this way you'll be able to determine if your dog is truly ready for that location. Because we want to introduce public access to your dog in a systematic way, where we aren't jumping around. We're taking him to locations that he's ready for. Which brings me to, when you visit without your dog, you can actually create a plan that will facilitate success for him. So you can go to these locations, you can look around, see all the sights and smells and sounds and distractions that will be present. All the things that your dog will have to work with when he goes to that public location, and you will be able to actually create a plan that will help him to be successful in those locations, okay? Now, the next tip that I want to talk about today is meeting your dog's exercise and freedom needs. So this includes providing the necessary amount and type of physical exercise for your dog before public access training. So here's what I mean by this piece of this tip, right? Our dogs require a certain amount of exercise. And if they aren't getting that exercise and then you take them out into public, they have all this pent up exercise and they're like, yes, we're out somewhere new and I want to sniff and I want to go and I want to do the things. But if they've had their exercise requirement met for the day, then they aren't going to have all that extra steam to bring out with them into public. And so this is really important. The type of exercise, the amount of exercise is going to vary greatly depending on the type of dog that you have, his age, these kinds of things. And I don't mean providing so much exercise that your dog is so tired that he can't misbehave. That's not what I mean. What I mean is just meeting his need for activity so that you two aren't fighting, like bumping heads when you go out into public because your dog wants to run around and play and you want to train. Along with that is your dog's need for freedom, right? Making sure that you're regularly providing your dog with opportunities to move freely, sniff, explore, and be a dog. Now, this is stuff that we've talked about a lot, especially in our live stream. So we've got some replays over on our Facebook group. The link is below, where we've really talked about what it looks like when your dog is working versus when he's not working. And we have talked about lots on this channel and in our group, and we teach this heavily inside of our programs. But our dogs, along with exercise, they also need to sniff. They need to move their bodies freely. They maybe need to dig. They maybe need to whatever. Like, our dogs have these basic needs that we need to provide for. So if your dog isn't getting enough time to sniff during his daily life, like explore new environments, sniff around, move around, when you go out into public, he's going to want to do those things. But if you have fully met his need for sniffing, then it won't be such a battle when you go out into public. Okay, so this comes into play in two different ways, okay? So first of all, it is necessary that we meet our dog's needs if we're going to ask them to do a job for us. And our dog's needs don't just end with food, shelter, and veterinary care. Okay? They also have species-specific behaviors that they need to be able to address. They need to be able to do. And if we don't provide for that, we are just going to fight with our dogs out in public. But secondly, you know how when you want to do something, like for example, I am gluten-free. And when I had to go gluten-free, there are specific like desserts now that I can't have unless I make them myself. And because there's so much work to make myself, I almost never do, which makes me want them more. Whereas the gluten-free stuff that I can just go to the store and buy, it doesn't have that same like excitement to it because I have access to it all the time. Sniffing is the same with our dogs. If we are giving them ample opportunities to sniff, then when we go out into public, they will have had that need met. Now, in our academy, we teach about freedom walks, and we teach how to do it, and it's one of the things allowing for this freedom in a safe way that helps our dogs to understand what is training and what is like their free time. And free always still means they need to be well behaved. Everybody needs to be safe. They need to be listening to you. This is the thing that makes the biggest difference in healing and focus and public access for our students. Now, along the lines of that is that if we are going to be offering our dog ample opportunities for sniffing, we need to do that in a way that does not then sabotage our public access training. Because, of course, in public, they can't be sniffing all the time. So this leads me to use the correct equipment for the correct moment, okay? How will your young dog learn the difference between working and not working? How is he going to know when he is allowed to sniff and when he's not allowed to sniff? Now, again, your dog is in training, so this is going to take time for him to understand the difference. And there are a lot of different ways to do this, but in our programs, we really have people, as long as it's safe for you and your dog, meaning he has polite walking skills, he's not going to drag you over. Again, we teach all that, but we like to use a harness to signify to the dog, all right, you can sniff, and you can move around within the confines of your leash. So this is like a polite pet type of a walk, right? They're not pulling. They're never pulling. They're still listening to you, but they don't have to be in heel position. They're allowed to sniff freely. They're allowed to greet people. They're allowed to go to the bathroom, these kinds of things. And then when they are training on a collar, that signifies to them, okay, now we're learning to stay in heel. We're not sniffing. We're not greeting people, etc. And what this means is that when you take your dog out to go to the bathroom or you take your dog for a walk around the block, he's starting to understand the difference between public access training and sniffing. And so by using different pieces of equipment, you get to meet your dog's need for freedom and for sniffing without accidentally sabotaging your public access training. Now, the fourth tip that I want to mention is good food motivation hygiene, okay? This includes things like using the right treats for the right job, okay? So food motivation is something some dogs give us for free, other dogs we have to work for, but in most cases, it's something we can accidentally screw up. So the biggest piece of this is using the right treat for the right job. Okay. So if you are really battling a lot of distractions, like you're going to take your dog out into public, it's one, I use high value treats in public pretty much until we reach like towards the end of a dog's training. And then we move to something lower value, but sort of, especially sort of 4 months to 20 months, that 20-month period there, when I take a dog out into public, I'm using something really high value. Okay? Because they are being confronted with sniffing and smells and sights and sound. There's so much for our dogs to filter through when they're out in public that I want to have something really yummy that's going to help me keep their attention. Now, what that means is using the right treat for the right job is that the excitement level of the treat should match the job I'm asking them to do. I don't want to overpay too much and I don't want to underpay too much. So if I'm just practicing easy behaviors at home in my living room, I'm not going to use high value treats. Okay. I'm going to use something a little bit less exciting that my dog still wants to work for, but I'm going to save the things like real meat, high value treats. I like to use that, I can't think of the name of it, but there's a refrigerated dog food that dogs really, really love. I like to use that stuff out in public and something less valuable at home. Now, this also means thinking about when your dog should eat his meals that day. Okay. So if you're going to be taking your dog out for training at 9 o'clock in the morning, he probably doesn't really need to have breakfast before you go, right? Like pick a healthy treat and use that in public instead, because I don't want you starving your dog in order to get him to pay attention in public. But if you've just given him his whole breakfast and 30 minutes later you take him out into public, he's probably not going to be hungry. Like unless you have like a bottomless pit of a stomach type of a dog, he's probably not going to be hungry when you go out into public. And that's going to hurt your food motivation. So for me, with my dogs, once they're past puppyhood, if I'm going to be taking them out into public before noon, I'm probably not going to feed them breakfast. I'm probably going to feed them breakfast out and about. And maybe I'll give them like a little bit of a snack for breakfast. But if we're not going to be going out for public access until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, then I am going to feed them breakfast. So this is something that you'll play with your own dog, and you'll come to a balance that works well with your dog's food motivation without, of course, we're never going to restrict food in order to get our dogs to pay attention. Just like with the exercise, we want to be smart with our exercise, meet our dog's need for exercise, but we're not working them so hard that they're exhausted when we take them out into public. Now, finally, you really need to create good skills for you, the handler. Okay? This is something that we talk about a lot if you've been hanging around our channel or our Facebook group or any of our free workshops or anything like that. We're always talking about the skills you, the handler, need to build, you, the trainer, because everything else is riding on that, all right? So your ability to understand and use rate of reinforcement and to truly understand and work through distractions will make or break public access training for you, okay? There are a lot of things that you as a handler need to know. Good mechanics, how to set up good training sessions, all of these kinds of things, how to use shaping and luring, how to proof behaviors, stimulus control. There's a lot of stuff you need to know. But rate of reinforcement and how to manage and work through distractions out in public or within a training session are the two things that will absolutely make or break your public access training. Now, your rate of reinforcement is simply how many treats per minute your dog is getting, okay? So when our dogs are learning something new or they're doing something very hard, we're going to give a lot of treats per minute. As they become more experienced, more advanced, that rate of reinforcement goes down. So let me just give you a quick, realistic example of this. When I'm working, let's say that I have a 6-month-old dog, we're going out into public, public access is new for him, and he's very excited, and he's having a lot of, it's new, right? I'm probably going to go through a cup of treats in about 10 to 15 minutes when we're out in public, because I'm going to be reinforcing him for walking nicely almost as quickly as I can. I'm going to be reinforcing him for looking at me. We're going to be stopping and doing little bits of training. He's going to get so many treats within 10 minutes that he's really building a huge reinforcement history with the behaviors that I want him to have. Okay? By the time that same dog is 2 years old and is kind of graduating his training, even though training never really ends, right? We will probably go through a cup of treats in like a whole 8-hour excursion into public. So that's a drastic difference, right? A cup of food in 15 minutes versus a cup of food in 8 hours. That is a huge change in rate of reinforcement. And that's something that we do over time. So you really learning about rate of reinforcement, which we will make a separate video on, and how to manipulate your rate of reinforcement for success is imperative to this endeavor, okay? It's imperative to your public access training, as well as a true understanding of distractions, how to introduce them, and how to work your dog through them. So these are some of these sort of tips that we wanted to talk about with public access, okay? These things that come up a lot for people. And if you want to learn more about having good skills and filling foundational cracks in your dog's foundation, because really, when we're talking about challenges with public access, usually there's a problem in your dog's foundation. We are going to be holding a foundations or a fundamentals advanced beginning webinar here coming up very shortly. All the details will be in the link below for that. So if you're watching this sort of the first half of June of 2024, you'll be able to catch it live. After that, the replay will be available and all the information is at the link below. All right, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.